My landlord sent his son to deliver the termination notice so he wouldn't have to look me in the face. 3 years later, I sent a lawyer to deliver one to him. I remember the sound the yellow envelope made when it appeared. Not slipped under the door, but tucked into the exterior mail slot in a way that meant I didn't find it until I came back from a supplier meeting and pulled it out along with a Canpar delivery notice and the hydro bill. A manila rectangle containing a single page of commercial lease language that turned out to weigh a great deal more than paper should. I had been running Millgate Books out of the ground floor of a limestone heritage building on McDonald Street in Guelph, Ontario for 5 years. The shop had been my aunt's before it was mine. She built it over nearly 2 decades. From a folding table at a church flea market and a small inheritance that most people in her position would have done something more sensible with. When she retired to be closer to her daughter in Vancouver, she called me before she called the landlord. She said she'd rather transfer the lease to someone who understood what the shop meant than watch a stranger take it in a direction she wouldn't recognize. I was 27 at the time and working in marketing for a publishing distributor in Toronto, spending every long weekend back in Guelph helping her with events and inventory, which I think both of us understood was my way of rehearsing for the thing I actually wanted to do. Taking over the lease wasn't a complicated decision. What was complicated briefly was the back wall. Water damage from a slow pipe had warped the shelving over the previous winter, and before I could open under my own name, it needed to come out and be rebuilt properly. My father, a retired electrician from Fergus who'd spent his career inside old Ontario buildings and had opinions about all of them, drove up on the long weekend and helped me do it. He said the building had good bones. He also said it had a better future than the man who owned it. The man who owned it was Conrad Pruitt, a Guelph commercial property investor in his 60s who had inherited his portfolio from his own father and seemed to regard tenants as a necessary inconvenience attached to an otherwise clean asset class. He managed the properties through his son, who handled day-to-day communication, and who wrote short, late-arriving emails that conveyed information in a way that made you feel you should be grateful to have received it at all. I paid on time every month for 5 years. I organized a literary festival partnership that brought foot traffic to the whole block. I kept the heritage storefront exactly as it was. Because I understood the building's designation and because I genuinely loved the limestone face and the old-growth fir floors and the crack in the lower left corner of the front window that I'd been meaning to formally report for 2 years. I was a good tenant by any measure that mattered. It turned out that didn't matter. The termination clause was on page 14 of the commercial lease. It permitted the landlord to terminate the tenancy with 90 days written notice for the purpose of substantial renovation or redevelopment of the property. I had seen the clause when I signed the renewal. My aunt's original lawyer had flagged it as standard commercial language, something to be aware of but not alarmed by. What I did not know then, and what took me the better part of a year to fully understand, was that Conrad Pruitt had been relying on exactly this clause to cycle out long-term tenants in favor of higher-paying ones for over a decade. When I called his son to ask about the renovation plans, I was told the scope of work was still being finalized. When I asked about the timeline, I was told it was uncertain. When I asked whether there was any possibility of a temporary relocation arrangement so Millgate Books could return after the work was complete, I was told that wasn't something the landlord was in a position to offer. 7 weeks after I vacated the unit, the space was listed for $110,750 more per month than I had been paying. The same heritage brick interior my aunt had spent years carefully preserving. The same wood floors my father had helped me clean and condition. No renovation had occurred. Not a wall, not a ceiling, not the electrical panel that genuinely did need upgrading. The crack in the lower left corner of the front window was still there. Within 2 months, a national printing and office supply chain had signed the new lease. I moved Millgate Books into a smaller space on a less trafficked street 3 blocks north. The ceilings were lower, the natural light worse, and the parking situation prompted complaints from my older regulars, who were some of my most loyal customers and also the most willing to tell me when something wasn't working. Business continued, but it had the specific quality of difficulty that comes from starting over in a place that isn't quite right for what you're trying to do. I didn't know, in those early months, that I was building toward anything. What I knew was that I was angry in a way I hadn't expected, not the hot kind that burns out quickly, but something quieter and more lasting that settled in behind everything else I was doing and didn't go away. I started keeping records, every email from his son, every version of the lease I could locate. I submitted a Freedom of Information request to the City of Guelph's building permit database, asking for any renovation or redevelopment permits filed for the McDonald Street address in the 18 months surrounding my eviction. None had been filed. There was a period, around month 8 or 9 in the new location, when I nearly let it drop. The shop was surviving. My father had come down again to help me adjust the shelving to better suit the new space, and my partner Felix had quietly suggested that sometimes the cost of pursuing something is higher than what you recover, and that it was okay to close the chapter if I needed to. He said it without pressure, which was characteristic of him, and I sat with it for about 3 weeks before I decided that wasn't actually what I wanted to do. Not because the odds looked good, but because something about the specific ease with which Conrad Pruitt had done this. The same clause, the same son delivering the notice, the same evasive answers about renovation timelines. Felt like it had happened before and would happen again. And I wanted to know. Finding Moira Elstad took the remaining months of that first year. She was a commercial tenants and leasing lawyer based in Waterloo, and a former colleague of my aunt's old solicitor had mentioned her name in a conversation about something unrelated. I wrote it down and did nothing with it for 2 months before finally making the call. I drove out to her office on a Wednesday afternoon with a canvas tote full of printed emails and scanned documents, feeling faintly certain I was wasting her time. She read through everything for close to 35 minutes without speaking. Then she set down the lease renewal addendum and said, "Commercial tenants in Ontario have less statutory protection than residential tenants, but misrepresentation of intent to exercise a termination clause is still misrepresentation. And I would be very surprised if this is the first time he's done this." She was not surprised. Over the following year, Moira and I worked through public records, building permit applications, land registry filings, property assessment appeals, and the informal network of small business associations and former tenant word of mouth that exists in every mid-sized Ontario city if you know where to look. We identified 5 other commercial tenants who had been removed from Pruitt-owned properties over the preceding 12 years under substantially similar renovation language. Not one of those units had been renovated. All 5 had been re-tenanted at meaningfully higher rents within 90 days of the previous occupant vacating. 12 years, 5 businesses. The same clause applied at the moment each tenancy had been running long enough for the gap between their lease rate and the current market rate to make the exercise worthwhile. It was not opportunism, it was a system. Moira and I discussed litigation at length. A civil misrepresentation claim was technically viable. We had the pattern evidence, we had the permit records, we had the documentation of the gap between stated intent and subsequent action. But Ontario civil proceedings moved slowly, and Conrad Pruitt had a commercial real estate lawyer on retainer who was experienced at prolonging proceedings, until plaintiffs ran out of resources or patience, and who would counsel a settlement for the minimum amount that made the case go away. A settlement, money, confidentiality, and the understanding that he would continue doing what he had been doing to whoever came next, was not what I wanted. My father, when I explained this to him over the phone on a Sunday evening, put his coffee down and said, "Then you're not fighting him on his terms. You're changing what the fight is about." Felix was the one who knew how to do it. Felix Drummond had been my common law partner for 4 years at this point. He was a financial analyst at a firm in Kitchener, who had a gift for finding the structural pressure points in situations that looked, on the surface, like pure legal or emotional problems. He'd been following everything closely, not intrusively, but paying attention the way he pays attention to anything that matters to him, which is completely. About a month after my conversation with my father, he sat down across from me at the kitchen table on a Sunday morning with a printout of Conrad Pruitt's registered property holdings in Wellington and Waterloo counties, and said, "He's carrying more debt than he can comfortably service. And the mortgage on the McDonald Street building has been in technical default twice in the last 4 years." Here is what I had to understand, because I didn't have a finance background and it took me a while to make it concrete. When a commercial landlord takes out a mortgage, that loan is held by a bank or credit union. The lender owns the debt. Sometimes lenders want to clear distressed debt off their books. Loans that are technically still being serviced but have defaulted once or twice and represent ongoing risk, and they will sell those loans at a discount to private buyers. The buyer then becomes the entity the borrower owes. Think of it simply, he owed the credit union money. If someone else bought that debt, he owed them instead. In Conrad Pruitt's case, the commercial mortgage on the McDonald Street building was held by Meridian Credit Union. The loan had flagged internally as a credit concern. If the right buyer came along at the right price, Meridian had reason to consider a sale. The right buyer could not, under any circumstances, be traceable to Millgate Books or to me. Felix and I formed a small private holding company, quietly, under a name connected to neither of us directly. My aunt contributed from her retirement savings. She had been following everything from Vancouver and was characteristically clear that if there was a way to be part of it, she intended to be. Two colleagues of Felix's, who understood the investment structure and believed in the asset, joined as limited partners. Then we waited, because the negotiation itself was going to take time, and any sign of impatience or urgency on our end would tell Meridian more than we wanted them to know. It took 16 months and 4 rounds of offers. There was a period in February, a freezing rain week when everything felt harder than it needed to be. When Meridian's commercial loan team indicated they would rather pursue a workout directly with Conrad than sell the note at a discount. Felix spent most of a weekend on calls I couldn't help with, rebuilding the investment case from the asset side, and I spent those 3 days running the shop and trying not to count the things I had no control over. On the Tuesday evening of that week, he called me just before close and said, "It's back on. We acquired the mortgage note at 63 cents on the dollar." Then we deliberately did nothing for 3 weeks. It was Felix's discipline, and I deferred to it completely. He said the worst possible outcome was moving before everything was airtight and fully processed, that any signal reaching Conrad Pruitt before the paperwork was final would give his lawyer time to complicate it. So I went back to planning the spring event calendar. I ordered a new shipment of Canadian poetry collections I'd been meaning to stock. I changed the window display. I waited. When Moira sent the formal notice of lien to Conrad Pruitt's registered property management company, it was a Thursday morning in early April. She called me after. Her voice was exactly as it always was, measured, practical, professionally unemotional. She said, "It's been sent. He'll have it by tomorrow morning." He called his son within the hour of opening that envelope. His son called the contact number listed for the new note holder. That number routed to Moira's direct line at her Waterloo office. She explained to him, without drama, without any variation in her tone, with the calm of someone who has prepared thoroughly for a conversation, that the commercial mortgage on the McDonald Street property had been purchased through Meridian Credit Union's distressed loan sales process, that the holding company now held the note, and that all future correspondence regarding the property should be directed to her office. The full acquisition of the building, the title transfer, the deed, the completion of what we had spent 3 years quietly building toward, was finalized 6 weeks later. Conrad Pruitt came to the shop himself on a gray Tuesday morning in early May. I had not expected that. I had expected lawyers or emails or silence. Instead, he walked through the door of the Millgate Books' second location, the low-ceilinged room with the difficult parking that we had been making work for 3 years, and stood in the entrance looking at the shelves. Then his eyes found me behind the counter. "You did this," he said. Not a question. "I did," I said. He was angry first, in the compressed way of someone who has decided anger is the posture that preserves the most dignity. He said things about market realities and portfolio management and the costs of holding heritage properties in Guelph that were not wrong, technically, in the narrow sense of being financially accurate. None of them were things he had said to me when I asked about renovation timelines. He tried something softer after the anger didn't produce a response. He talked about continuity, about his father, about what it meant to hold a property through decades of changing conditions. I listened. I let him finish every sentence. Then I told him, in the same measured tone his son had used, when I asked whether there was any possibility of returning to the space after renovation, that the transition would be handled professionally, that he would receive formal written correspondence regarding any existing tenancy terms, and that all future communication should be directed to Moira Elstad's office in Waterloo. He left without another word. 2 of the 5 displaced tenants we had identified through our research filed formal complaints once the change of ownership became a matter of public record. The 12-year pattern, the same clause, the absent renovation permits, the rapid retenanting at higher rents, was now a documented file rather than a quiet local history. His son, once he understood that personal civil liability for property managers involved in misrepresentation claims was not theoretical, stopped responding to his father's communications within approximately 6 weeks of the title transfer. The law firm that had originally drafted Conrad Pruitt's commercial lease termination language quietly withdrew from representing him the following month. In late June, a letter arrived at Moira's office addressed to me personally and forwarded to my home with a note from her saying she thought I'd want to see it. It was handwritten on plain white stationery. No letterhead, no legal language. Conrad Pruitt's handwriting. He said that what had happened to me in the original eviction had been wrong. He said he had not allowed himself to think of it that way at the time, had categorized it to himself as a standard business decision within the terms of the contract, and that the intervening years and the loss of the building had clarified things that had previously been unclear to him. He did not ask for anything. He did not propose anything. He did not excuse anything. He just said it. I read it twice. I kept it in the same canvas tote as the original termination notice. The yellow envelope, the single page of lease language, the one I had pulled from the mail slot along with the hydro bill on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon 3 years before. Millgate Books returned to its original home 11 months later. The renovations, real ones, planned and contracted through a heritage restoration firm my father had worked alongside during his career, took just over 4 months. Proper masonry repointing on the exterior. New flooring throughout matched to the original species. The electrical brought fully up to current code. The plaster above the reading corner replaced and finished to match the surrounding wall, which took longer than anything else because the original finish had been applied with a technique the restorer had to research specifically. My father project managed the final week himself, the way he had the first time, arriving every morning at 7 with coffee in his old thermos and his 30-year-old level and his particular gift for noticing when something was almost right but not quite. On the morning of the reopening, before the doors opened to the public, my aunt flew in from Vancouver. She walked through the shop alone in the quiet before the city outside woke up properly and stopped in the reading corner. The velvet chair she had reupholstered herself 23 years ago. The one we had kept in back storage at the second location through all 3 years away, waiting, was back in its place. She put her hand on the back of it and stood there for a moment. "It's right," she said. That was all. It was enough. Felix and I got married the following September. A small ceremony, immediate family and close friends, at a dinner in the Elora area north of Guelph, where the limestone gorge makes the whole landscape feel like something that has been there long enough to be trusted. My aunt gave a toast that made several people cry, which she accomplished without appearing to try very hard. The invitations we printed ourselves on the small letterpress unit my father had helped me install in the back workshop room at the reopened shop. Creamstock, navy ink, block type. 62 of them over a rainy weekend in July, the two of us, with music on, and the windows fogged from the humidity outside, and the smell of ink that I have always found, for reasons I can't fully explain, genuinely calming. I kept one framed above the press. I wanted something from that particular weekend that would last. I get asked sometimes whether I feel sorry for him. It is an honest question, and I have thought about it seriously. What I feel is complicated. Not pity, not satisfaction, something more difficult and less clean than either. The handwritten letter lives in the same bag as the termination notice, and I think that is probably the right place for it. Both things are true at once. That what he did was wrong and cost real people real things, and that he eventually understood that, and that neither of those facts cancels the other. What I don't feel is any version of regret about what I did. The shop is mine now. Properly, formally, deeded to the holding company my father helped me think through and Felix helped me build. Every morning I unlock the front door and the old hydraulic closer drifts sit open behind me just as it always did, and I think for a moment about a Wednesday in March when a yellow envelope said I had 90 days to go. Some people accept the loss and build somewhere new. That is a reasonable and honorable choice. But the place you build matters, and the history of what you made there matters, and when I had the option to come back to mine, I chose to be patient enough to wait for it to exist. I just took longer to arrive than anyone expected.